You don't panic. Not the way other people do, anyway. Something goes wrong. At work, at home, in the middle of a situation that has everyone else in the room losing their composure. And something in you just switches into a different gear. Quieter, more focused. The voice drops. The eyes narrow. You start assessing. People notice it. They've told you. At first I thought you didn't care. You're so calm in a crisis. I don't know how you do it. And you've never had a clean answer for them. Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like calm. It doesn't feel like a skill. It just feels like what you do when things go wrong. Here's what the psychology says about that. The composure is real. The competence underneath it is real. But the way it got built, the specific developmental process that produced a man who doesn't rattle, came at a cost that almost nobody has named directly. This is that conversation. There's something clarifying about a crisis for a Gen X man. The noise drops away. The priorities become obvious. The thing that needs doing becomes visible in a way that it isn't when everything is fine. And you move toward it. Not with adrenaline, not with drama, with a kind of quiet, focused competence that you've carried so long, you've stopped noticing it's unusual. Other people spiral. You assess. Other people need someone to tell them what to do. You already know. Not because you're fearless, because you've been here before. Maybe not this exact situation, but this feeling. The feeling of uncertainty, with no adult in charge, and something needing to be handled. You've been here since you were 11 years old. That's not a metaphor. For a generation of men who came home to empty houses, who managed adult responsibilities before they had adult resources, who learned early that waiting for someone to explain the plan was a luxury they didn't have, the crisis reflex was never trained in. It was trained out. What replaced it was competence. Real, earned, reliable competence. The ability to stay functional under pressure while everyone around you stops being functional. That's genuinely valuable. It has served you, the people around you, and everyone who has ever needed the steadiest person in the room to step forward. But it was never free. Because the psychology of how that composure got built is specific. And once you understand it, the cost stops being invisible. Developmental psychologist Emmy Werner at the University of California, Davis, spent 30 years tracking children who grew up in high-stress, low-support environments, and what happened to them as adults. Her longitudinal research identified a pattern she called stress inoculation. Children repeatedly exposed to manageable adversity without consistent adult scaffolding developed unusually high thresholds for distress. They didn't stop feeling stress. They learned, through repetition, to function through it without external support. The result in adulthood was a man who handles pressure better than almost anyone around him, who remains operational when others shut down, who can be trusted in exactly the situations where other people can't be trusted. Werner's research also documented the other side of that finding. The same developmental process that produced high crisis competence produced low help-seeking behavior. The neural pathways that got built were the ones that said, handle it, not the ones that said, tell someone. Because telling someone, in the environments that built these men, was rarely an available option. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Adult Development examined what researchers called emotional suppression under chronic stress exposure in men, finding that men who developed high functional competence in early adversity showed significantly elevated rates of what the researchers called deferred distress. The stress wasn't absent, it was stored, processed later, privately, or not at all. The study's finding was pointed. High crisis competence and unexpressed emotional accumulation aren't opposites. They're the same adaptation seen from two different angles. The man who doesn't panic in the crisis is often the man who carries the crisis alone afterward. Which means the question isn't whether the composure is real. It is. The question is what's been accumulating behind it, and what that accumulation eventually costs. Here's the honest version of the Gen X non-panic story. You didn't learn to handle pressure. You learned to handle pressure alone. Those are not the same thing. And the difference matters more than it might appear. Handling pressure is a skill. Handling it alone, always, as the default, as the only available mode, that's a constraint dressed up as a strength. And for a Gen X man in his 50s, who has been the steadiest person in every room for 30 years, the constraint has had consequences that are only now starting to be visible. You say you're fine when you're not as a performance, because fine is the setting you default to when you're actually running a significant deficit. Because the alternative, saying, it's actually a lot right now, I could use some support, requires a neural pathway that didn't get much use in the years when it was being built. The people around you have no idea, because you look the same. You're still functional, still showing up, still the one who handles things. The signal that something is wrong in another man, the dropped composure, the visible struggle, the reaching out, those signals don't fire the same way in you. So the people who would help, if they knew, don't know. That's not strength. That's a design feature from a childhood that required it, running past the point where it's serving you. Which is what makes this stage of life, right now, for a Gen X man in his 50s, the first real opportunity to examine what was always just accepted as personality. The composure isn't the problem. It never was. The habit of carrying everything it contains without ever setting it down, that's worth looking at. Because here's what's true about a Gen X man at this stage. The environments that made it necessary to handle everything alone are mostly gone. The empty house is gone. The parent who wasn't available is gone or different. The workplace where vulnerability was professional suicide has changed or been left behind. The original conditions that built the no help needed setting have largely dissolved. But the setting is still running. And at 55, with the noise of building a life starting to quiet down, what's been stored behind the composure starts to have more room to be heard. The research on men in this age bracket is consistent on this. The distress that didn't get processed in the moment doesn't disappear. It surfaces later, in sleep, in the quality of close relationships, in the particular flatness that arrives when a man has been the reliable one for too long without anyone being reliable for him. This is not a call to stop being the man who handles things. That man is real and valuable and earned. It's a call to notice the difference between choosing composure and defaulting to it, between staying calm because it's the right response and staying calm because the alternative was never available, and now you've forgotten it exists. You can handle things and also say when something is hard. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They just feel that way to a man who learned one without the other. The composure that people have been calling impressive your whole life wasn't a gift. It was a solution to a problem nobody should have handed to a child. That doesn't make it less real. It makes it more expensive than you were ever told. If this landed somewhere it needed to, subscribe. More coming, built for exactly where you are. And if you caught the last video, the one about the 5 things Gen X men do that quietly intimidate everyone around them, this is the origin story. That video was about how the world reads your composure as threat. This one is about where the composure came from and what it cost to build it. Same man. Worth watching both. You've been the steady one for a long time. It's allowed to have cost you something.